Hey there, rulers. Welcome back to another deck profile with yours truly, Paul Reissmann. Today we are taking a look at my recent Berserker list that I've just piloted on the channel. Let's dig in.
This session brought to you by Odyssey Games for pre-orders and sealed product, CCG Prime for tons of singles and supplies, Cardo Doko for international rulers looking for product, and FoulLibrary.com for articles and wonderful deck lists. It's also brought to you by our guest lecturer patrons, Vite Ramen. Class is in session.
All right, so let's start at the beginning where beginnings begin with Vega, Steadfast Steward. So when I first was looking at Vega support, I was really curious as to what we were going to initially get. And Vega just seemed like a general, like an every kind of ruler that we were going to have. I did not know what to expect until we got to Berserker, who is the J-ruler for the deck, attached to the contract. One of the funnest aggro decks I think I've ever played in the game. Mostly because Berserker is literally just insanely fun to play. His effects are ridiculous. He has so many effects on him that it's a little... It's kind of surprising he has this many effects on him, frankly, but just also the flavor of just this butler hulking out into essentially what is a red Hulk with white hair. It's pretty dope. So Berserker has Swiftness, First Strike, Pierce, and Bane. If this card would deal damage to a J/Resonator your opponent controls, it deals that much damage to that J/Resonator and that J/Resonator's controller instead. So you're not only dealing damage to to the body, you're also dealing damage to the player, which is always going to happen. Your opponent will always take damage. And then you can just pay a red to recover, and you can pay a black to give it Eternal for the rest of the turn. Berserker is a little nuts. 8/8 stats, those seem a little small because they can, it can die to Flame of the Outer World, which is a very old card. However, there's a little bit of help that comes for Berserker, and I listed it here in the deck. So we're also going to take a look at, I chose the Child of the Fire Moon. I do not like my contracts getting canceled. I also like having a little bit of defense in the wings in case my opponent tries to just, aggro Berserker for some reason. Or they put something very threatening on the board. I want to have a free way of just popping something that is really, really helpful to me. So we're playing for the contract. Extract of the Fire Moon, produce 2 wills in any combination, red and or black, and then you draw a card. If you happen to have 2,000 or less life, you get to contract into Berserker. So I have essentially 4 J-rulers in the deck, and 4 ways to get to this. Typically I only need to see 1, and the game is pretty much over. I'm also playing Sprinting Steward, which is the mastery spell for Vega. As an additional cost to play this spell, you have to pay any amount of life. J-Resonators you control gain +X and Swiftness until the end of turn, where X is the life paid, is the total life you paid in chunks of 400. So one of the things I've done in the past with this card is just pay 100 life to give my board Swiftness. Right? Because it says you can play any amount of life, and it doesn't matter, but you have to pay the life. But there's also times in which, if I have Sprinting Steward in hand and I need to get below 2,000 life, I want to give my board Swiftness and the buff, but more than anything, I want to set my life to the life total that I need it to be in order to go on and to contract, essentially. So Sprinting Steward is really critical for the deck in that way. I think you definitely just play 4 of it. But if you're going to be playing a card that lets you set your life at anything you want, essentially, I think you have to play Inferno. Early on, I saw this combo, and I just thought it was fantastic. So the combo is you play Sprinting Steward for free by tapping Vega. You then pay your 2 will that you have on turn 2. To play Extract of the Fire Moon, you produce your red and your black, you draw your card, and you make your Berserker. Now, you have a Berserker. You have a field that has a buff on it. Your whole field can get Swiftness. If you are low enough in life, you can just swing with Berserker. And if you had set up Inferno to set your opponent's life to the same as your own, Berserker just kills them. Not to mention Inferno is just a good card. It's just a very solid card in general. So this card actually has a lot of utility in the deck, but the life setting that mode is very important to this deck as a win condition. So Inferno is frankly really, really good. That being said, Dry Wing goes a long way against this deck, but it doesn't entirely destroy it, so just keep that in mind. So as support for this combo, we have other cards and other ways to sort of get to the game, right? First, I played Phantasmal Ascendant. This card is amazing because if I get any of these stones that I have listed down below, all of them have me pay life except for 2. And so those coming in and letting me, manipulate my life even further is really good. Plus, I get the benefit of just, having extra will. I can do this on my opponent's turn, which means before it goes to my turn, I get that last priority sequence. I keep the stone going into my turn, and so I get to do a few other things and have a little bit more interactability if my opponent chooses to do something. It's also a 4/4, which is, not too bad under the cocoon that we have down below, which I guess I should talk about now, so I'm going to do that. So I play the arena in Narrow Valley. A lot of people are not playing this, and that's totally fine. I wanted to do something a little bit more standard build for this first video with Vega. Your opponent can't gain life, and anytime you have a J Resonator attack, your board gets +X+X, where X is the number of times you've attacked. So with Berserker, you can attack a lot and get additional buffs, but it also counts the attacks you've done before you've attacked with Berserker. So just keep that in mind. I know some people are going in a tokens direction with this card, which I think is hilarious and super fun. But I just wanted to do something very standard. This card is super good for keeping your opponent's life where you set it with Inferno, which is really helpful. So yeah, that's why I'm playing this, and it goes really well with your little weenies, right? So if you have weenies and you're swinging in, you actually get the buff for the field, so your weenies actually get a little bit bigger, which is helpful. Next, I'm playing Forest Sealed, One-Eyed Dragon. This seems pretty standard. It was clearly meant to be like support for Berserker from the very beginning, but it's also just a really good card in general, right? It not only matches the color scheme of the ruler, but it does things that are really helpful in getting your game state to a place where you can actually play Berserker. And 600 damage goes a long way in this deck, so draw an extra card, deal some damage to your opponent. There was times in my game against Dalton where I thought, let me deal 600 damage to try and make the wall die a little bit quicker. So this plus an Ascendant that's already used its effect, or a Witch of the Fallen Kingdom, or anything like that can potentially have that wall crack and die if your opponent doesn't have First Moon up yet. So there's a lot of ways this card is important to the deck. Definitely life loss is important. But it supports the deck in some ways that I was surprised to learn that it does. So next up, we play 4 Dante's Enter the Game of Gods. Pay 1500 life to draw 3 cards, hopefully get your contract, and you're even closer to doing the contract. Seems like a pretty good card to be playing, but in general, it's also really helpful to have that stat buff and all of those other simple skills that you can give to stuff. That's really good. You can also give it to Berserker, so anytime that I believe this would have you drain twice, but I'm not entirely sure. Jeremy would have to tell me. But if Berserker smashes into a Resonator and your opponent takes damage too, that might trigger 2 drains, but it might be instantaneously just 1 drain as well. Kind of hard to say, but drain is always nice for this deck. Just in case your life gets a little too low, which has happened at times. So I think this card is an absolute staple in this list. If you're trying to go for Berserker, play Dante Enters the Game of Gods. I play 4 Adventure of Narrow Valley. I don't know if I would play this card in the future. I just needed something to help me get my life even lower, and there were times where it didn't feel like I had the ability to do that. In hindsight now, after going through that game with Dalton and playing some other games, this card may or may not be necessary, but it's there. It's a 6/7. It's a decent body. It gets swiftness, precision, first strike, bane, whatever you want or more. So that's really helpful in trying to do other aggressive things, but it's definitely more of a mid-range card, and I don't know if I'd play it in the future, but it worked okay. Next, I played 3 Witch of the Fallen Kingdom. I wanted to have interactability with my opponent because I'm obviously not a green deck, so I wanted something that would help me to sort of stop my opponent and slow them down enough to where I could flip Berserker. So your opponent cannot search their deck. You saw this come into the game against Dalton. It was really, really good because I could stop his daily research and then force him to have a cancel, to which I have Red Moonchild, so that's really helpful. Witch of the Fallen Kingdom is just a really good black card, probably the best black card printed that's in play right now. So I play 3 of it. Next up we have Gradius. There are times against decks like Justice where I wish I had some sort of card destruction. In general, like Gradius just goes very far. It's still one of the best pieces of removal in red, in my opinion, because it gets rid of things like Eternal. It also turns off my opponent's Berserker, which I think is really funny. As long as they don't have the Arena, this just kills Berserker outright. So this card has utility in the mirror match. It also has utility against other contract rulers. This just kills Fairy Tail King too, by the way. Kills Neverend. This thing does a lot of work, so Gradius, still a super good card. Next we have an oldie but a goodie, Duel of Truth. When I remembered I had this card in my box, I was, oh my gosh, I was just over the moon at the thought of being able to play this card. No pun intended there. So target J Resonator you control and target J Resonator your opponent controls battle and deal damage equal to their attack to each other, which I understand as Berserker, having dealt damage to a thing with this replacement effect, also deals damage to my opponent before the attack goes through. So there are times in which this card can actually, from the way I'm interpreting it, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it works this way, you're dealing double damage with one Berserker, which can just end the game. So Duel of Truth is really strong in this deck, as long as I've interpreted it correctly. But it's super solid. Love this card. I've always loved this card. And I'm so glad I got to play with it again. It's so great. Last but not least is the Last Sacred Sword. Sometimes you just need a little bit of reach, and this is the reach card in the game, right? You play this card to just burn your opponent out for 10 damage, and you call it good. In hindsight, I had 3 of this card in my hand at one point, and I was like, how do I use this card? Because my opponent has Wind Moonchild, strangely, because that Wind Moonchild is not seeing nearly as much play as we thought it would. But the Last Sacred Sword is one of those cards that gets really hosed by that. So you just neg your whole board and your hand for, you know, for nothing. So don't play this card into a Wind Moonchild. Just don't do it. But it is there for other decks. It's just there for additional reach. If I got some other points of damage in, it also works really well in combination with Inferno. So if my life is set really low and I can still Inferno below at 2 or at or below 10, I can just Last Sacred Sword for game. So that's super helpful in that way too. It gives a little bit more versatility to Inferno. Gives me another win condition. That's always helpful. Stone deck, Magic Stone of the Ebon home. Take 3 damage, and because Zeus is not in the format, I feel a lot more comfortable running this. Just remove the top card of your opponent's deck from the game. You saw in game 3, that was super helpful. Just getting rid of Mikey's and First Moons, and like just card comes into play, helps you toward your win condition, removes a card from your opponent, just negs them 1. Seems pretty good to me. And Zeus, of course, if you end up hitting an Olympian, this feels pretty bad, but Zeus is not everywhere right now, so this is really helpful in that situation. Next up, I play 4 of the Null Magic Stone. If you forgot this card exists, you don't forget it anymore. It's a really good card. So this card deals 200 damage to you, which is really helpful in regard to Sealed One-Eyed Dragon. You can ping yourself for 2 and then bring it back later on in the game. For that turn, speaking of, Null Magic Stone is also there if you're trying to like dance around paying life. It's also there for that particular reason. It's in color, so that's really helpful. And then if you're ever at null, which I don't anticipate I'm ever going to be at null to the point where I want to banish this card to produce stuff. Yeah, that gets hosed as well by Drywing, so I don't like that. But Null Magic Zone, super good. Deal 200 damage to yourself. Whittles you down in a way that is really helpful in achieving the win con of this deck. And then 2 of the 4C Stone, because this card is just good, and I wanted good cards. Anyway, guys, this is my Berserker list. Let me know what you thought of it down in the comment section down below. I know it's certainly not optimal, but this is the deck I've been looking to bring to the channel for a very, very, very long time. Love Vega, love Berserker. Let me know how much you love this down in the comments. Hit that subscribe, ring that bell, and until next time, guys, this has been Paul, signing off.